This week on Eco Show, we have got an animal of the week, which is the mighty ant. We'll be chatting about all the ins and outs of ants, and I think some interesting things about them you may not have heard before. This for the research this week, we'll be talking about megafires and how mammals are responding to them. And for our news, we'll be talking about reforestation in Colombia, the use of reflective paint to cool houses, and the recovery of a rare monkey. This is Eco Show. Hello, hello, and welcome to Eco Show. This is a show about news, research, and happenings in ecology, the environment, and things like that. I'm Henry, and the structure of the show is that at the start of the show, there's a thing of the week. It could be an animal, it could be a environmental thing that happens, like what are clouds or what's El Nino. And then we talk about some research, and then we go through the most recent news from the past week. So this week, our thing of the week are ants. And the name means the biter, and it comes from an early Germanic language. It apparently evolved from a wasp in the Cretaceous period, which is 145 to 66 million years ago. And there are about 13,000 different types of ants that have been classified out of an estimated 22,000 ants types or species. So there's about 9,000 there that are expected to be but haven't been classified. And the only place that lacks ants is Antarctica. They also may exceed the biomass of all wild birds and mammals. So the weight of all the ants in the world may weigh more than those. And some things about ants: they have a division of labor, which most people are probably familiar with. So they've got the worker ants, they've got fighter ants, and things like that. They have communication between individuals, and they can solve complex problems. One of the main ways that they communicate with each other is by leaving pheromone trails, so little chemical trails. And this allows them to have a trail somewhere, and then it can be followed at night or different times of day, things like that. And so a forager ant can go out and explore around and find something, a food source or something like that, and then leave a trail that the other ants can then follow. And then when they do a clever thing where every time they're going out and coming back, they'll leave a trail when they're coming back in as well. And so when that food source is then all used up, then they'll stop leaving the trail. So they won't keep going out to that. So the signal will get lighter. They also use pheromones for a number of different things. They can use them offensively as well, and something called propaganda pheromones, which they put on other ant species and confuse them and make them fight each other. So they've got a very complex use of pheromones. They have these pincers, ants do, and they have a wide variety of different things they can do with that bite. The bullet ant has on the pain scale of stings, has apparently the most painful sting in the world. And Jack jumper ants have a bite that can be lethal to humans. And as you might have guessed, the location of jack jumper ants is in Australia. There are also trap jaw ants, which can use their jaws to catapult intruders away or out of the nest, or to fling themselves backwards to get away from predators. They have different, what am I talking about? I was talking about pathogens there in this next section. They have a whole bunch of different sort of developments that just allow them to be such a successful animal on Earth. They have secretions that with complex chemicals in them that have antibiotic properties. They also, when there's flooding in the nest, some species are known to drink water from inside the nest and then go outside and excrete it outside to get the water out of the nest. And they are one of the few animals besides mammals that show a certain type of learning. And we have an image of tandem running here, which is when one ant is sort of teaching another ant how to go about and find this new food source. So a foraging ant may lead another ant to the food, and the leader is sensitive to the progress of the follower. So it'll slow down when the follower lags, or will speed up if it's getting too close. They are pretty flexible in terms of their roles, and there's been a study done where they took a whole bunch of worker ants and divided them into two groups, and one of those groups was rewarded with prey when they would do a task, and the other was made to fail every time. And then when all those were reintroduced, the foragers continued to be foraging, and then the ones that were trained to fail moved into brood care. So they sort of respond to how well or how poorly they are at doing a particular role and may shift that accordingly. They've also been known to farm, so you may have heard this before, but leafcutter ants eat a fungus that grows in their colonies. We have an image of it. It looks pretty bad. It looks like this is a bad thing, but they feed this fungus chopped up leaves, and they can respond to negative reactions by the fungus to different types of leaves, and will feed the fungus the right type of leaf for it to be able to grow, and then they'll eat bits of the fungus. These leafcutter ants also have, like we mentioned before, a symbiotic bacteria on them that produce antibiotics, which they then can use to help protect the fungi. So just a quick go through there on ants. There's so many other things that ants do. They are really amazing. And when you think, like we said before, that the biomass of ants is that of all wild birds and something else. I forgot what the other thing is. The number of things that they can do that they've developed over all these millions of years is pretty astounding. So we'll have to do an ants part 2 sometime. But that is it for that now. Now we're on to our research. The research is about megafires. And as we're seeing pretty much in the news all the time, megafires are getting increasingly frequent, and they're almost annual in their occurrence in the United States. But there's not a well-known implication for animals at this point. and woodland savannas, so oak forest or things like that, have higher biodiversity and are a big risk from these fires. But most of the mega fires so far are focused on coniferous forest, so pine forest, and things like that. So this was looking more at impacts on mammal species in woodland savanna habitats. And what they did to study this was they looked at 5 years of camera trap data on 8 species. They were bobcat, coyote, deer, fox, squirrel, jackrabbit, raccoon, and skunk. They excluded bears because their range spanned outside of the study area, so they couldn't get a great idea of what the effects of megafire and responses of bears to megafire were. And during the study period, there was a large fire called the Mendocino fire, I believe, and it was one of the biggest fires in California's history. I believe it was in 2018, and they found some surprising results. There was a negative impact on some species, but overall they found, even with this really traumatic big fire, there was high resistance to disturbance. That just means that the fire came through and many of these animals came back in population levels that were similar to before the fire, which is pretty good news. They found, though, that there was a little bit of difference in how positive the return was, and in particular, areas with burned canopy, so the top of the trees. If the top of the trees were burnt off, then the number of species coming back was lower than when you still had a canopy present there. So that makes sense. If you have more of a canopy, you're just going to have more animals generally in the food web, because you have bugs in the trees, you have birds in the trees, and that'll have roll down effects to different things. Squirrels may be more up in the trees and maybe will then provide a source of food for these other animals in the area. And so that basic point of this research is that, yeah, mega fires are bad, but they may not be as bad in some cases as we expect. But the key is to create a situation where you are preserving the canopy. And ways that can be done is, there are a few different ways that can be done, but by trying to stop the fire from getting to the top of the canopy, that means having less branches and things sticking out at lower levels, and those will get burned off. Frequent light fires can do a sort of maintenance on that. You could also do it manually. So some cool research there, and kind of positive. Continuing with positive research, but in our news section now, Colombia has been reporting some good results for their forests. There's less deforestation going on. And this has been a complex issue because in 2016, Colombia negotiated a peace with FARC, which is a group that's more in some more remote regions. They've been having conflict for 6 decades, with an estimated 450,000 people dead over the conflict between them. And in the wake of this peace, there was a lot of deforestation because there were other rebel groups in these remote areas that took advantage of the situation and clear-felled forest for agriculture and things like that. And as I pointed out before, these things are complex. It's not like an evil thing to deforest or anything like that. It's a it's what people are going to do when they want to get more agriculture or when they want to set up their drug production facility. But that's a bit of a deeper issue than I can go into well here. So, anyways, you had this peace in 2016, relative peace, and then you had other rebel groups take advantage of it, start to really ramp up deforestation. And just recently, they've been working on a more inclusive peace agreement that includes these other rebel groups. And focusing in this area is really important because it doesn't get a lot of coverage, but Colombia is the second most biodiverse country in the world. So preserving the forest there is really important. They are the most biodiverse country for bird life. And there's been, since they've had this more conclusive peace talks, a 26% reduction in deforestation. So it's hard to tell what the long-term benefits of this are going to be, but there's some initial good responses. At least what they're saying in the peace talks is that they're trying to prioritize the environment when they go into these talks now. So instead of benefits to the environment being a nice thing to have in negotiations, they're attempting to bring in solid agreements around deforestation and things like that to prevent deforestation. And it does appear that there is a reduction so far. So it's working so far so well for now. Our next article is, we talk a lot about heat. It's been pretty much constantly in the news lately that places are recording record heat, and it's being talked about a lot in Europe, but areas that aren't talked about so much are slums. And in particular, there's a lot of slums in India where it gets insanely hot. It can be up to 120 degrees Fahrenheit or 47 degrees Celsius in the summer. And that has been going on for a little while now. This has huge health issues for people who are already vulnerable being in slums because they're unsafe environments. And oftentimes these slums are built out of materials that trap heat really well, actually. So they could be tin structures, it can be tarp ceilings, or asbestos that's used to build these buildings, and these buildings trap heat really well. So there's been a move to use white paint on roofs which reflects sunlight and cools houses. Apparently, from measuring it, they found that this can lower temperatures inside the houses by 2 degrees Celsius, which people reported makes enough of a difference that they can learn, they can still be living comfortably, they can be inside as well, because oftentimes people will have to sleep on the roofs at night because it's too hot to sleep inside the house. But the issue with this is that it is expensive. So there's been nonprofits that have helped people to buy this paint, but some of those nonprofits are moving out of the area, and this is leading to people not being able to buy the paint. But it is a start to an overall bigger issue with just the whole housing situation out there. But there can be some benefits from using this reflective paint. So, which is sort of it's kind of like what our ice caps do and what snow does is it reflects light back up out of the area. So that's kind of a cool thing that's going on, kind of a disappointing that there's not a more consistent movement to distribute this paint, and it can be a bit cost exclusive for people because they're already not making a lot of money. Okay, and our last bit of news for this week is that a monkey is returning pretty well in Tanzania. The Kipunji monkey was identified to a mainstream extent in 2003 in Tanzania. We'll have a photo of the monkey, and at that time it was critically endangered. When they found it, it was in a small area, but they've been able to return its numbers, and it's increased by 65%, which is pretty cool. This has been through having a holistic practice to benefit the monkey populations and to benefit the local populations as well. So it's incentivized people away from cutting down forest for timber. And one of the main ways that they've done that is by getting people into beekeeping, which is apparently used in a lot of cases to incentivize people away from doing forestry that is getting timber, that is knocking down these monkeys' habitats. So this is a crucial reoccurring thing that comes up with conservation and with reforestation, is that so much of the key thing is how do you work with people to make it a possibility for them. People are living who are living closest to the environments that are most impacted by climate change and things like that know the environment best, but are oftentimes forced by economic situations to use that environment in ways that may not be beneficial for animals and things that are in those rare environments. And the key thing to do is be able to give people the alternative options to extraction of those resources. So beekeeping is a cool little alternative there. And that is about it for this week. So I hope you're having a good week, and we'll catch you all next time. Bye bye.